Thank you, Vinita, for the nice introduction. Thank you to the organizers for the opportunity to join this international workshop. My name is Miriam. I'm very much linked via Hydra to Italy and very pleased to be able to represent here also SAPEA and the work we have been doing for the European Commission. We are doing, Hydra is doing a lot of field work in Italy, so we're very linked to that, and we're cooperating with Giuseppe, we know Francesca, etc. So I'm very happy to show here also and share our knowledge on biodegradable plastics. What is it all about? What is driving us? Now my slides are not moving, why not? Yes. We are focusing on applications with potential benefit for substitution with biodegradable polymers. We have intentional input to the environment, for example, by microbeads in cosmetics, or for example, seed coatings, or cartridge cases by hunters, and there are many more applications where we put intentionally plastic into the environment, which is almost not possible to recover anymore. We have some applications where we have high potential of loss, be it balloons or fishery gears or some tree protectors. Any other applications in agricultural activities can be added on here too. Furthermore, we have applications where we have lost during use, our tires, our shoe soles. Every one of us is apparently losing about 200 grams per year by just wearing shoes during our everyday life. Or then paint, for example, not only on the walls like you see here in the picture, but also on streets, on boats, and so on. We are losing while using this sort of material. So now I would like to introduce you into the work of SAPEA and the working group who is doing that in a context of policy. In 2018, the European Union set up this plastic strategy as a foundation for a new circular plastic economy. And one of the pressing questions was, how can we deal with biodegradable polymers in solving the problem of plastic pollution? Can it be a very big role, or is it a small role, or in what context should that be? So the European strategy for plastic in the circular economy sets out for a cautious approach first by recognizing that biodegradable plastic can certainly have a role in some applications, and in the innovation efforts in the field are very welcomed, as also highlighted in the first talk of this morning. So at the same time, it was also clear that there's a need for a regulatory framework for these kind of plastics. So it's not going kind of uncontrolled how to use it. In the plastic strategy, the Commission set out to harmonize rules in defining and labeling the compostable and biodegradable plastics to enable adequate and sorting and avoid false environmental claims. So that's a big topic to follow up. And they want to develop life cycle assessment, so you can identify the conditions under which the use of biodegradable and compostable plastics are eventually in the end beneficial, and then also be clear about the criteria for such applications. The third point they developed and identified is the identification of applications with clear environmental benefits, and in those cases consider measures to stimulate innovation and to drive market development in the right direction. From this background, from this baseline, the European Commission addressed the group of chief scientific advisors to the Commission with a very specific, or with a question. What is, from a scientific point of view and an end-of-life perspective, and applying to plastic that biodegrade either in the terrestrial, riverine, or marine environment? and considering the waste hierarchy and circular economy approach, what are the criteria and corresponding applications where biodegradable plastic can be beneficial to the environment compared to non-biodegradable plastic. Okay, said this, I would like to explain you now the organization behind what, how is that happening when the European Union or the commissioners are seeking for help by the scientific community. There is a group of chief scientific advisors of 7 people of very different fields. For example, at the moment, Chair Nicole Grobert is a professor in nanomaterials. Then we have 6 other colleagues joining her, being the chief advisors. And in a scheme, you see that the Commission set up the so-called scientific advice mechanism when they need some help for policy challenges, in this case, in terms of biodegradable polymers. So they asked the group of chief advisors for a scientific opinion, and they will not do that out of the blue. They will then ask the group called SAPEA for generating an evidence review report. On that, they then can build the scientific opinion. SAPEA is a merged or an umbrella, you could say, of many organizations already in place, you see here on the right side of the slide. And they are then spreading out and looking for experts who can help in this particular topic. So SAPEA put together a team of experts of very different topics, again, building a working group to work on the corresponding topic here, biodegradability of plastics in the open environment. Myself here on the bottom, I'm a marine biologist working out in the oceans for many, many years, performing biodegradation experiments, developing different techniques, testing methods, etc. And then we have very different other experts had on board. The work done by the SAPEA working group ended up in this evidence review report, and which has then been communicated by SAPEA to the chief scientific advisors, which has then generated the scientific opinion you see here on the right side of the slide. Now I'd like to give you some insight on the main aspects of this report. It's not in detail. For that, I would like to invite you to read the report and the scientific opinion, or also don't hesitate to contact me anytime if you like to have some exchange. When we talk about the open environment, everyone I think is very clear. There is not just one open environment. We should distinguish between the marine environment, at least, freshwater environment, be it a lake, be it a river, be it a stream, and also the soil. And when we are looking on these pictures, we see the surface, and we should not forget that we are also in a 3-dimensional space, that we do have also to look inside, for example, soil, or also in the marine environment, we have sediment to look at. I would like to highlight that we are looking in these 3 compartments also in different habitats. For example, you see the scheme on the right side here, starting on land, you have soil, you have maybe a forest area, and in the freshwater, you have a river, you have a lake, you maybe have the surface of the lake, you have the bottom of the lake. Giuseppe was showing that very nicely, that the accumulation of plastics in these different environments are occurring. The same occurs or applies for the marine environment. We have beaches, we have shallow seawater, a sea floor, but also the deep sea. And in all these compartments, in all these ecosystems, we also have to consider and think about that the conditions do vary. I just highlight three, let's say, most important ones. For example, temperature, because temperature drives microorganisms working on the biodegradable polymers to be biodegrading them, and they work a bit better when it's hot compared when it's cold. Or the biodegradation processes are different if oxygen is present or if it's not present. At the same time, organisms need, and also microbes need, some nutrients to live on, because the polymers usually just bring carbon on the plate. So you need also some nitrogen and phosphorus compounds to actually really work very well. So it depends also if the nutrient concentration of this particular ecosystem is rather high, medium, or low. So this gives you an overview of what aspects are important when we talk about the open environment. When it then comes to biodegradation, we need to be very much aware that two words have to be distinguished. We talk about biodegradability and about biodegradation. When we talk about biodegradability, it depends where the material ends up and how the conditions are there, because what we decided in defining more properly is that biodegradability is a potential of a material, but also a system property. It does not only depend on the material, what a material scientist would look at, and not only on the conditions, what an environmental scientist would look at, but on both. So that's why we call it a system property. On the other hand, how the biodegradation goes out in the environment is a process as such. So we have to look at and name it as biodegradation. It's not the potential as such, which is biodegradability. We defined, again, in the report very precisely that plastic biodegradation is the microbial conversion of all organic constituents to carbon dioxide and or methane, depending on oxygen presence, new bacterial biomass, and the remaining mineral salts. And the rates of the biodegradation differ depending on the prevailing conditions. So all this said prepares you for one of the main graphs of the report that we have. First, when a biodegradable plastic ends in the open environment, is facing abiotic degradation processes, but also already biotic. But after all, in the end, it's the microbes who are transferring all of the constituents into end products or biomass. And from a regulatory aspect, we need to consider and talk about the time frame, what is acceptable, and the variations of the different compartments, soil, freshwater, and ocean, and then the different ecosystems in between or within one compartment. The report clearly says for a biodegradable plastic, you have to identify it by measure the end products, so effectively CO2 and or methane. And then another aspect of the report is that the biodegradation rate of plastic should be assessed in reality, because if you look at the laboratory setup, it's a closed vessel, it's very controlled, and so the criticism is very near that environmentally relevance is a bit doubtable. So we should combine these two kind of approaches and assess the biodegradation rate in reality, because you cannot do that on the entire planet. Yeah, so it would slow down innovation drastically. And that's not the aim of this report. We say that an assessment of biodegradation rate in reality and controlled conditions, as you can see here in a tank system, is a good approach. And then taking up also Francesca's work, sure, is very important to assess also the impact and effects of biodegradable plastics on organisms and ecosystems, as you can see here in the picture of these rice plant affected or test, and you can clearly see how they are affected by different concentrations. Overall, the report also says that we should aim to come up with a good testing system covering relevant conditions and applications, and link this very clearly. So we do not test everything everywhere, but we want to know for specific applications where they end up, and then select the corresponding environments and conditions to be looked at. There are several challenges to work on. How can we account for this variation between ecosystems? So far, we have testing schemes looking at one condition. We urge and suggest that we should also add more relevant conditions, so we have a better baseline then to decide which applications should be substituted, and nevertheless also what's the time frame which is acceptable. So far we have tests, they're looking at 6 to 2 years, but what about some applications, for example, of 2 to 5 years or maybe 10 years? You see here in the background a so-called geotextile application, which is important for some construction areas where you have to support the soil so it's not flushed away by the next rain, until the vegetation is grown back and supporting the soil again, and the geotextile is not needed anymore. And usually it takes more than a couple of years, and this could be an application interesting to discuss if 10 years would be acceptable. On the other hand, you see here an application of mulch film where you use it every year again, so the biodegradation process and rates has to be much faster, for example. Another challenge is to account for the needed plastic material properties, introduced already this morning by Vincenzo, a very important aspect. And so far we see in science that the different disciplines rather work independently, and we should merge much more, so that we develop together materials which are have the functionality for the specific application, and at the same time are also addressing the conditions where this application will be used out in the environment. And so it could maybe be with this high throughput approach, interesting new materials in the near future. That was very nice to hear this morning. The report also says that we need standardized and harmonized testing methods. So it clearly says we need to fill the gap of standard test methods and specifications. I don't go into detail here. We're very happy to give you more input and insight on a personal level, or maybe in the discussion later. So far we have incomplete standard specifications. Most is done in the recent year on the marine level, because it's so present in the media, a few in soil, because from an agricultural point of view, applications are on demand, and very little is done in freshwater. And so we say, how about set up a standard test methods which are not present yet, and then also some specifications for the different environmental compartments, so that society can decide faster, and industry can also, with the scientists together, develop faster new materials. Labeling and communication is a very important part, so that society can also understand what is it all about with these biodegradable plastics. And also here we need some clear standardized labeling strategies and rules, which are not in place yet. Only we have good examples, for example, in California and Belgium, but it's not like global or like on a EU level. So we see a far widespread confusion about which material are biodegradable and how fast and how to handle them then in a post-use process. And here also Sapea says that How about information policies, market-based policies and regulations to change the behavior of the actors of different economic sectors and contexts? This gives the baseline for some policy options in the report, identifies 24 in the areas of definitions of biodegradable plastics and biodegradation, on regulation, standards and certification, risk assessment, information labeling and education, incentives, subsidize new business models, and last but not least, also research, development, and innovation. So in summary is that we conclude biodegradable plastic have a role to play within the circular economy that is based on principles of resource efficiency. Biodegradable plastics may bring benefit over conventional plastics in applications where it's challenging or basically too expensive to avoid fragmentation ending up in the environment, and also even basically not possible to remove them, and or difficult to separate plastic from organic material. A third conclusion is that biodegradable plastics should neither be considered as a universal alternative to improved waste management practices, nor as an answer to inappropriate disposal, in particular littering. Critical success factors in incorporating biodegradable plastics into the circular economy depend on their sustainable production, use, and disposal. And also here, a lot of effort has to be taken in a fast manner. Integrated approaches should ensure the appropriate uptake and management of plastics that biodegrade in the open environment or can be composted at home. Last but not least, the evidence suggests that an integrated policy approach using principles of resource efficiency in the circular bioeconomy can contribute to their successful introduction and management that minimizes economic and environmental risks. And there is a range of options that may serve policymakers to cover areas like the definition, like the regulation, like standards and certification, risk assessment. I named it before. From that, then the scientific advisors of the Commission came with 4 clear suggestions. First, adopt a definition of biodegradability as a system property, which takes into account material properties and the specific environmental conditions. Limit the use of biodegradable polymers in the open environment to very specific applications for which reduction, reuse, and recycling is not feasible. Support the development of coherent testing and certification standards for biodegradation of plastic in the open environment. So we have a clear structure how to test and how to certify. And promote the supply of accurate information on the properties, appropriate use and disposal, and limitations of biodegradable polymers to relevant user groups. That's the main suggestion which came out of the evidence review report, summarizing the scientific opinion. I'd like to thank you all for your attention on this topic, biodegradability of plastic in the open environment. And again, that was done by a working group of experts called by SAPEA, and SAPEA was asked by the chief scientists for the European Union to support policy making in the context of the circular economy in this specific topic. Thank you so much.